Stop! Everyone stay back!
My leg!
Anna, don't move.
Don't touch the railing. Nobody moves it. Sir, look, the support peg. It didn't just crack. It was cut clean through. Marble doesn't do that on its own. Jung Jin. Someone wanted her on those stairs to fail. Then I want to know exactly who. Before we rewind 3 weeks, to the morning this penthouse still ran in order and silence, I want to say thank you, genuinely, to everyone who keeps coming back for these stories. It means more than you know. If this is your first time here, tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss where this goes. Drop a comment telling me one word for how you think this story ends. I'll be reading every single one and replying myself. Now, let's go back 3 weeks. At the top of Seoul's skyline, in a penthouse that occupied 3 private floors of glass and steel, billionaire Seo Jung-jin ran his empire the way he ran his household, with total control. But control was slipping. 10 housekeepers in 18 months had walked out, some in tears, one still shaking as she handed in her resignation letter without explanation. The reason had a name, Bom Kim, his only son. Bom moved through the penthouse like it owed him something, sharp-featured, immaculately dressed, a silver watch on his wrist, and contempt in his voice for anyone who wore an apron instead of a designer label. Since his mother's death, he'd decided the safest thing to love was money, and the easiest thing to hate was anyone who didn't have it. Then Anna Okafor walked in, a Nigerian architecture postgraduate, paying her own way through a foreign degree. Anna took the head housekeeper position with her eyes open. She'd heard the warnings. She needed the salary more than she needed his approval, and she had no intention of being the 11th maid to run. Bom had never met someone who wouldn't break. He was about to find out how far he'd go to make her. Comment Anna if you're already rooting for her before this even starts. Seo Jung-jin sat alone in his study on the top floor of Sky Tower, a single sheet of paper resting on the glass desk in front of him, like something contagious. It was a resignation letter, the 10th in 18 months. He didn't need to read it twice. He already knew how it would sound, because they all sounded the same by now. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm grateful for my time here, but I can no longer continue in this position. Polite. Careful. Never once naming the real reason, though everyone in the building knew it without being told. He set the letter down and looked out over the city, lights strung out beneath him, like something he was supposed to feel proud of. He had built an empire out of nothing but instinct and stubbornness, had out-negotiated men twice his age, had turned a single manufacturing contract into a name that opened doors across 3 continents. And yet he could not keep a housekeeper in his own home longer than a season. He knew why. He had known for a long time, and simply hadn't wanted to say it out loud, because saying it made it real, and making it real meant admitting that somewhere along the way, in the years after his wife died, he had lost his son to something he didn't know how to fix. Bom had been gentle once. Jung-jin remembered a boy who used to leave juice boxes out for the staff's children when they visited, who cried when a housekeeper's mother passed and insisted on going to the funeral in his little black suit. That boy was gone now, replaced by someone who wore his grief like armor plating, sharp at every edge, daring the world to get close enough to hurt him again. Jung-jin picked up his phone and called the agency. "Send me your best candidate," he said. "Someone who won't scare easily." There was a pause on the other end, the kind of pause that told him the woman on the line already knew his household's reputation. He didn't blame her. He almost laughed at how far it had all traveled, that even placement agencies now spoke of the Kim penthouse the way people spoke of haunted houses, with a note of caution and a little bit of pity. He didn't know it yet, but 3 floors below him, in a cramped shared apartment on the other side of the city, a young woman was reading the same job posting with an entirely different reaction, not fear, but relief. Anna Okafor had done the math 4 times, and it came out the same every time. Tuition, textbooks, rent, the money she sent home to her mother in Lagos every month without fail. None of it added up on a graduate student's part-time wages. The posting for a live-in housekeeping position at Sky Tower Penthouse paid nearly triple what she was making now, and it came with a warning attached, whispered by the recruiter on the phone, as if it were a footnote rather than the entire point. The family has had some turnover. The son can be difficult. Anna had smiled at that, though the recruiter couldn't see it. She had grown up the second of 5 children in a house where difficulty wasn't a warning, it was Tuesday. She had put herself through architecture school on scholarships and stubbornness, had sat in design critiques where professors dismissed her ideas before she'd finished the sentence, had worked twice as hard for half the credit, more times than she could count. She did not scare easily either. If anything, the warning made her more certain, not less. Difficult, she could handle it. What she needed was the money, and it was difficult to pay well. She packed 1 suitcase of clothes, and a second one, heavier, of drafting tools, and rolled blueprints, half-finished thesis work she intended to keep chipping away at during whatever hours the job left her. Her roommate begged her to reconsider. "You don't know what these people are like," she said. "Money like that changes people, and not for the better." Anna only shrugged and zipped the second suitcase shut. "I'm not moving in to make friends," she said. "I'm moving in to make rent. There's a difference." She arrived at Sky Tower on a Monday morning, the city still soft with fog below the tower's upper floors, and rode an elevator so silent she could hear her own pulse. When the doors opened onto the penthouse, she stepped into a home larger than any building she'd ever lived in, and found Bom Kim waiting for her in the entryway, arms crossed, studying her the way a customs officer studies a suspicious bag. "You're the new one," he said, not a question. "Anna Okafor," she said, extending a hand he didn't take. He circled her once, slow, deliberate, the way he might inspect a piece of furniture he was deciding whether to keep. "Nigerian," he said. "Interesting. My father usually goes through the agency's Korean staff first. I suppose they're running out." Anna kept her hands steady at her side, and her expression unreadable. "I was told the position was open to qualified applicants. I qualified. Qualified to clean," Bom said, "isn't the same as qualified to work in a home like this one. There are things here worth more than your entire family makes in a year. I'd hate for something to get broken because you didn't understand its value." "Then I'll ask before I touch anything I'm unsure of," Anna said evenly. "That seems reasonable." Something in her calm visibly irritated him. She watched it land, a small flicker behind his eyes, like a man expecting resistance and getting agreement instead, which somehow unsettled him more. He turned and gestured toward the east wing. "Your first task is the silver room." Every piece polished, catalogued, and returned to its exact original position by 6 o'clock. There are 412 pieces. It was, she would learn later, an impossible deadline by design, the kind of task meant to produce tears or a resignation letter by lunchtime. Anna only nodded once. "I'll get started," she said, and walked past him toward the silver room without another word, leaving him standing in the entryway looking, for one unguarded second, like a boy who had swung at something and hit only air. She did not finish all 412 pieces by 6. She finished 380, methodically, correctly, each one gleaming, and returned to its labeled place in the felt-lined drawers. And when Bom came to inspect at exactly 6 o'clock, prepared to seize on the incompleteness as proof of failure, he found instead a note left beside the unfinished tray. "Ran out of time before quality. Will complete the remainder by 9, properly, rather than rush the last 30, and risk damaging them. Available for review then. He stood there longer than he meant to, reading it twice. Over the following days, Bom tested her the way a wave tests a seawall, again and again, expecting eventually to find the crack. He gave her orders that contradicted the ones he'd given an hour before, and then blamed her for the confusion. He made comments about her accent in front of guests, loud enough to be heard, soft enough to claim he'd meant nothing by it. He asked her, in front of 2 of the household staff, whether people, where she was from, understood how to operate imported appliances, and watched her face for the flinch he was certain would come. It never came. Anna answered every provocation with the same level, professional calm, not warmth. She wasn't interested in earning his approval, but a composure so complete, it left him with nothing to push against. She corrected his contradictory instructions politely and in writing, so there was a record. She let his comments about her accent hang in the air unanswered, until the silence itself became the correction. She did her work well, on time, and without complaint to anyone but herself, late at night, hunched over her half-finished blueprints by lamplight, reminding herself in the margins of her sketches why she was really there. It infuriated him in a way he didn't have language for yet. He was used to being the immovable object in every room he entered. He was not used to meeting one. By the second week, frustration had curdled into something meaner. He began looking for opportunities instead of waiting for them. It rained hard on a Thursday evening, the kind of downpour that turned Seoul's streets into rivers of reflected neon, and Bom handed Anna a garment bag holding 3 of his father's suits, freshly returned from the dry cleaner across the block. "Take these up the service stairs," he said. "Don't use the elevator. It's reserved this evening." It wasn't, she would learn that later, but she didn't question it, only nodded, and stepped out into the rain toward the service entrance, a garment bag held carefully over her shoulder to keep the suits dry. The door was locked when she reached it. She knocked. No answer. She circled to the main entrance and found that locked as well, though she could see lights on inside, could see shapes moving past the windows, staff going about their evening, unaware, or told not to notice. She stood in the rain for 25 minutes, the suits growing heavier and darker with water, despite her best effort to shield them, before a housekeeper finally happened to pass a window, saw her, and let her in, apologizing, confused, saying she hadn't known anyone was locked out. Anna said nothing about it to Bom. She simply resent the suits for cleaning at her own expense the next morning, deducted quietly from a paycheck she could not afford to shrink, and said nothing to Jung-jin either, though she suspected, correctly, that he would have wanted to know. The blueprints came next. She kept her thesis drawings in a portfolio case in the small staff room off the kitchen, worked on them during her rare breaks, careful never to let them interfere with her duties. She came in one afternoon to find the case open, her drawings, 6 months of structural revisions, load calculations, a design she'd been refining since her 2nd year, soaked through with what smelled unmistakably of spilled coffee. The ink bled into illegible clouds across pages that had taken her weeks to draft. There was no note. There didn't need to be one. Bom passed her in the hallway 20 minutes later and didn't quite meet her eyes, which told her everything the absence of an apology couldn't. She sat with that loss alone that night, allowed herself exactly 1 hour of grief in the dark of her small staff quarters, and then began redrawing what she could remember, page by page, because stopping was never something she'd learned how to do. The water came on a Tuesday morning in the main kitchen, in front of nearly the entire household staff, gathered for the weekly supply delivery. Anna was reviewing the pantry inventory when Bom appeared, agitated about something. She never did learn what, exactly, only that his university friends had visited the night before and left him in a mood she'd started to recognize, brittle and looking for a target. He picked up the steel mixing bowl sitting full of ice water on the counter, meant for chilling the morning's produce, and before anyone in the room fully understood what was happening, he threw it directly at her. The cold hit her like a slap, ice water soaking through her uniform, running down her collar, and for one long second the kitchen went utterly silent. 4 maids frozen mid-motion, with their hands rising to their mouths in shock. Anna stood there dripping, water running down her face, and did not cry. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, looked at him, not with fear, which was what he seemed to want, but with something colder and steadier, a kind of disappointment that landed harder than any scream could have, and said only, "I'll finish the inventory once I've changed." She walked out of that kitchen with her spine straight, and it was that walk, more than anything he'd tried before it, that told Bom Kim he had lost whatever contest he thought he was running. He had wanted to break her. Instead, he had only confirmed, to every member of that household, exactly what kind of person he'd become. He told himself, standing there in the sudden quiet with the empty bowl still in his hand, that this was the end of it, that he'd made his point, and it was time to move on. He didn't yet know that his university friends, the same ones who'd left him in that mood the night before, were already planning to visit again that weekend, already laughing about the maid who wouldn't quit, like it was a game, with an obvious next move, already egging him towards something he would not be able to undo. 3 days later, one of them would stand at the base of the grand marble staircase with him, pointing at the support peg beneath the banister, saying the words that would end everything Bom Kim thought he understood about his own life. Just loosen it a little. She'll never even notice until it's too late. He would notice, though. Everyone would. His father most of all. If you were in that kitchen, comment on the one word you'd have wanted to say to Bom in that exact moment. I'll pick a few of my favorites to feature in the next chapter. The hospital corridor was too bright and too quiet. The kind of quiet that made every footstep sound like an accusation. Jung-jin sat beside Anna's bed for the better part of an hour after the surgeon confirmed the fracture would need pins and a long recovery. Watching her drift in and out of anesthesia, her leg elevated and wrapped, her face pale in a way that made him feel something close to rage and something close to shame in equal measure. He had built a fortress on the top floor of Sky Tower to keep his family safe from a world he didn't fully trust, and somehow the danger had come from inside it. He stepped out into the hallway to take a call from building security, and that was when he heard his son's voice drifting from the small waiting alcove around the corner, low and pleased with itself, phone pressed to his ear. "I told you it would work," Bom was saying, laughing under his breath. "You should have seen her face going down. She won't be back on those stairs anytime soon, I promise you that." A pause, then colder and more satisfied. "Yeah, problem solved." Jung-jin stood very still. He had spent his whole life reading people across negotiating tables, learning to hear the difference between a man who regretted something and a man who merely regretted getting caught. What he heard in his son's voice in that hallway was neither. It was a triumph. He didn't announce himself. He simply reached out, took the phone from Bom's hand mid-sentence, and ended the call. Bom turned, already halfway into an excuse, and stopped when he saw his father's face. He had seen Jung-jin angry before. In boardrooms, on calls with underperforming executives, once memorably with a contractor who'd cut corners on a building's foundation. He had never seen this. This was quieter. This was worse. "How long," Jung-jin said, "have you known that peg was cut?" Bom's mouth opened. Nothing useful came out of it. "Don't," Jung-jin said. "Don't you dare stand in this hospital and lie to me. I heard you. I heard exactly what you told your friend, and exactly how pleased you were saying it." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "A woman is in that room right now, with pins going into her leg, because you decided she needed to be taught a lesson. My son did that. not a stranger. My own blood, in my own home, to a woman who has done nothing since the day she walked in but her job. Father, I didn't think it would. You didn't think, Young-jin repeated, and something in the words landed like a verdict. That has always been the problem, hasn't it? You didn't think when you drove out the last 10 women who worked for us. You didn't think when you humiliated her in front of the staff. You didn't think when you decided a person's safety was a game to win in front of your friends. He let the silence sit before he continued. You will think now. By the time they returned to Sky Tower that night, the decision had already been made, and it did not require debate. Bom's accounts were frozen by morning, not reduced, not restricted, frozen entirely. Every card declined, every line of credit severed, with a single call from Jung-jin's lawyer. His car, the silver coupe he'd treated like an extension of his own body, was collected from the garage by a company representative before noon, the keys handed over without ceremony. And when Bom, still reeling, tried to argue that surely this was excessive, that surely a fine or an apology would settle it, Jung-jin only handed him a folded black apron. You will wear this, his father said, and you will serve in this house exactly as she has, until she can walk again without pain. You will cook her meals. You will carry what she cannot carry. You will do every task you mocked her for doing, and you will do it correctly, or you will do it again. There is no allowance in this house for a man who cannot yet be trusted with an inheritance he clearly does not understand the weight of. Bom stood holding the apron like it might bite him. I am your son, he said, quietly, almost pleading. Then act like someone worth that title, Young-jin said, and walked away, leaving him alone in the marble entryway, where, weeks earlier, he had circled Anna like a customs inspector, deciding whether to let something through. The kitchen, it turned out, did not care who your father was. Bom burned the first 3 meals he attempted so badly that smoke alarms went off twice in one afternoon, filling the east wing with a haze that took an hour to clear and left him coughing over the sink, apron singed at one corner, staring at a ruined pan like it had personally betrayed him. He shattered a set of imported crystal glasses, trying to carry too many at once, on a tray he hadn't learned to balance, and stood frozen over the wreckage on the floor, oddly more shaken by the sound of it breaking than he had been by anything else that week, as if the crash of something expensive and irreplaceable finally made real what his father had been telling him for days. He scrubbed the marble floors of the grand staircase, the very stairs that had put Anna in a hospital bed, on his knees with a brush and a bucket, until the skin across his knuckles split and stung under the cleaning solution. And still Jung-jin walked past without comment, without softening, letting the work itself do the talking he'd stopped trying to do. It was Anna, home now and confined to a wheelchair with her leg in a rigid brace, who finally spoke to him without contempt. She found him one afternoon, sitting on the kitchen floor beside a pot he'd scorched beyond saving, head in his bandaged hands, and rather than the silence she might have been owed, she wheeled herself closer and said, evenly, You're using too much heat and not stirring. Rice doesn't forgive impatience. He looked up at her, waiting for the mockery he was certain was coming. It didn't come. She simply reached over, adjusted the dial on the stove and said, Start again, lower. Watch it this time instead of walking away. He didn't understand at first why she would help him. He asked her, days later, hands raw from scrubbing, voice smaller than he'd ever let it be in that house. Why are you teaching me anything at all? I put you in that hospital. Anna considered the question honestly before answering. Because cruelty taught you nothing, she said. Maybe patience will do better. And because I don't need you broken, I need you to understand what you did. And understanding doesn't come from being humiliated, the way you humiliated me. It comes from doing the work and feeling, for once, how much of it there actually is. He didn't have a response to that. He simply nodded, and the next day, he burned the rice a little less. The university, when he finally returned to it 2 weeks later, offered no such patience. He arrived without the coupe, without his usual crowd of friends waiting by the front steps, without the easy confidence that money had always lent his posture. His friends noticed the absence of all three within the first 10 minutes. Min-chae, who had stood beside him at the top of that staircase and told him to loosen the peg just a little, looked at him now like he was something slightly embarrassing to be seen near. "Heard your dad cut you off," he said, not quite bothering to lower his voice. "Rough. Are you coming to the club Friday, or is that above your budget now?" The laughter that followed wasn't cruel exactly. It was worse than cruel. It was careless, the kind of laughter that didn't think he was worth the effort of real contempt anymore. By the end of the week, calls went unanswered. Group messages excluded him without explanation. A birthday gathering he'd have once been expected to fund happened without an invitation reaching him at all. He sat alone in the campus courtyard one afternoon, phone silent in his pocket for the first time in years, and understood with a clarity that hurt more than any of his father's punishments had, that none of them had ever actually liked him. They liked what came attached to him. Strip that away, and there was nothing underneath, in their eyes, worth keeping around. He thought of Anna then, oddly, of the fact that she had never once wanted anything from him except to be left to do her job, and had gotten a fractured leg for it instead. She had never had money to offer anyone. She had only ever had herself, and it had been enough to make her the only person who still spoke to him honestly. He went home that evening, and for the first time since his mother's death, opened the drawer in his room where he kept the last photograph of her, laughing on a beach somewhere, her hand shading her eyes from the sun, a version of his family from before the coldness set in. He sat on the floor of his room with that photograph for a long time, and something in him that had been sealed shut for years finally gave way. He found Anna in the small garden off the east terrace, where she liked to sit in the evenings now that she could manage the wheelchair on the flat stone paths. He didn't plan what he was going to say. He simply knelt down in front of her, on knees still tender from days of scrubbing floors, and the words came out broken and unrehearsed. "I don't have an excuse," he said. "I've been trying to think of one for weeks, and there isn't one. I hurt you because you didn't break the way I wanted you to, and that's not a reason, that's just cruelty, and I don't know when I became someone who does that to people." His voice cracked. "My mother would be ashamed of me. I've been ashamed of me, and I didn't even know it until I had nothing left to hide behind." He looked up at her, eyes wet, all the sharpness gone out of his face. "I'm asking you to forgive me, not because I've earned it. I know I haven't. Just because I need you to know that I see it now. All of it. And I am so sorry." Anna looked at him for a long moment, the evening light soft across the garden, and when she finally spoke, her voice held none of the ice she'd have been entitled to. "I forgive you," she said simply. "Not because it erases what happened. It doesn't. But I don't think holding on to it does either of us any good. And I can see, really see, that the person kneeling in front of me right now isn't the one who threw that water. You've done the work. I watched you do it." She reached out and touched his shoulder, briefly. "That matters more than an apology ever could." He wept then, openly, the way he hadn't allowed himself to since he was a boy, and Anna simply let him, her hand steady on his shoulder until it passed. The months that followed rebuilt Sky Tower into something it hadn't been in years. Bom cut every remaining tie to the friends who'd vanished the moment his wealth had, and found, to his quiet surprise, that he didn't miss them. He took over the household's morning routines without being asked, learned to cook properly, learned to fix what he broke instead of walking away from it, and discovered a strange, steady pride in work he'd once considered beneath him. It was on one of those ordinary evenings, carrying tea out to the terrace, that he found his father and Anna sitting together in the low light, heads bent close over one of her old blueprints, restored now, redrawn from memory after the coffee had ruined the originals. His father asking careful questions about load-bearing walls, with the kind of genuine interest Bom hadn't seen from him in years. He watched the way Jin looked at her, and the way she looked back, and understood, all at once, exactly what he was witnessing. He set the tea down, and later that night, found his father alone in the study. "I know," he said simply, before Jin could explain himself. "About you and Anna." Jin braced, visibly, for anger that didn't come. "I'm not upset," Bom said, and meant it. "She brought something back into this house that's been missing since Mom died. I felt it before I understood what it was. If anyone deserves that kind of warmth, it's you, both of you." He paused, and added, quieter, "You have my blessing. For whatever that's worth now." "It's worth everything," Jin said, and for the first time in a very long time, embraced his son, like the boy he remembered, not the man he'd nearly lost. "Comment your name, and where you're watching from. I read every single one, and I'd genuinely love to say hello."